At 7:30 on the morning of October 24, 1944, Commander David McCampbell swung himself into the cockpit of his F-6F-5 Hellcat aboard the carrier USS Essex, just as a radar operator sprinted across the flight deck toward him, waving a message that would soon reshape the history of naval aviation. McCampbell was 34 years old. He already had 25 confirmed aerial victories to his name. As commander of Air Group 15, he carried responsibility not only for his own survival, but for every pilot under his command. The radar report was blunt. 60 Japanese aircraft, fighters and dive bombers, were inbound. They were already on their way. McCampbell had been sitting in the ready room when the alarm sounded, its harsh metallic tone echoing through the steel corridors of the carrier. Outside, across hundreds of miles of Philippine waters, the Battle of Leyte Gulf had begun. It was the largest naval battle in modern history. Entire fleets were maneuvering toward collision, and every aircraft capable of flight had already been launched, recovered, or hastily refueled. On Essex, only 7 Hellcats remained ready for immediate launch. 7 fighters, against 60 incoming enemy aircraft. The arithmetic required no interpretation. Standard naval doctrine recommended a 3-to-1 advantage for attackers. The Japanese had nearly 9-to-1 superiority. McCampbell knew exactly what that meant. He had lost 11 pilots in the past 3 months alone. He remembered every name. Lieutenant Morrison, shot down over Formosa. Ensign Caldwell, killed during the Manila strikes. Lieutenant Commander Harris, missing since the Taiwan raids, never found. McCampbell had written letters to their families himself, each one explaining how their sons had died far from home in skies that never forgave mistakes. Now more pilots might join that list. The carrier task force was exposed. Other American carriers had already launched their combat air patrols, but those fighters were spread thin across 60 miles of ocean. There was no concentrated shield here, no reserve waiting below deck, only 7 Hellcats. McCampbell glanced down at his fuel gauge as his plane captain tightened the final straps across his chest. Half full, not enough time to refuel completely. The enemy formation was only 22 miles away, closing fast at 200 knots. He had 6 minutes. 6 minutes before Japanese dive bombers would reach attack range. 6 minutes before bombs could slam through the carrier's flight deck, turning steel, aircraft, and men into burning wreckage. His Hellcat carried 6 .50 caliber Browning machine guns, for 100 rounds per gun, 2,400 rounds total, enough to destroy multiple aircraft, if used perfectly. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine roared to life beneath him, vibrating through the airframe with 2,000 horsepower of mechanical fury. He looked across the deck. 6 other Hellcats were spinning up. Lieutenant rushing in the aircraft beside him. Lieutenant Hayes. Lieutenant Johnson. 3 more pilots. Young men already committed to a battle none of them could win by numbers alone. 7 against 60. McCampbell was the commander. The decision was his. He could send all 7 fighters directly into the enemy formation and hope to break it apart before the bombers reached the fleet. Or he could split the force. The tactical manual was clear. Never divide your fighters when outnumbered. But the manual assumed you had enough fighters to begin with. McCampbell made his decision in the seconds it took his plane captain to yank away the wheel chocks. He pointed toward 5 of his pilots. Then he pointed toward the southern quadrant. Attack the bombers. Destroy them before they could reach the carriers. Then he turned to Lieutenant Rushing. Tapped his own chest. The meaning was unmistakable. The 2 of them would take the fighters. 2 Hellcats. Against 40 escort fighters. He released his brakes. The Hellcat surged forward down the flight deck, engine screaming at full power. The carrier fell away beneath him as the aircraft lifted into the humid morning air above the Philippine Sea. Rushing followed 30 seconds behind. They climbed fast. 3,000 feet. 6,000. 10,000. Ahead, dark specks appeared against the blue horizon. 60 enemy aircraft. McCampbell's fuel gauge still read half full. 90 minutes of flight time, if he survived that long. He angled the Hellcat toward the sun, climbing to 20,000 feet. Altitude was life. Altitude meant speed. Speed meant control. The Japanese formation cruised 12,000 feet below, their fighters circling protectively around the vulnerable dive bombers. Mostly Mitsubishi A6M0s. McCampbell knew them well. The Zero could outturn a Hellcat in a horizontal fight. It could climb faster at lower altitude. But the Hellcat had advantages. It was heavier, stronger, built to dive faster than anything Japan had. Weight became velocity. Velocity became killing power. McCampbell rolled inverted and pushed the nose down. The Hellcat plunged toward the enemy. 300 knots. 350. 400. The formation rushed upward toward him. He selected his target carefully. A trailing Zero. The weak link. Always attack the straggler. At 800 yards, he centered the fighter in his gun sight. 600. 400. The Japanese pilot never saw him. McCampbell squeezed the trigger. 6 machine guns erupted simultaneously. The Zero's wing shattered instantly. The aircraft flipped violently and spiraled toward the ocean 4 miles below. First kill. He pulled up hard, for G-forces crushing him into his seat. The Hellcat climbed back toward safety. Rushing appeared beside him. His wingman had destroyed another Zero during the same attack. 2 down. 58 remained. The Japanese formation disintegrated in seconds. Fighters scattered. Some climbed. Some dove. The bombers lost their protective shield. McCampbell rolled again and dove. Another Zero climbed to meet him. A fatal mistake. The Hellcat's superior power at altitude made escape impossible. His guns fired. The Zero exploded in flame. Second kill. The battle became rhythm. Dive. Fire. Climb. Repeat. Third kill at 7:52. Fourth at 7:56. McCampbell glanced at his fuel gauge. Dropping faster now. Climbing burned fuel mercilessly. He switched tanks. Rushing stayed beside him through every attack. Smart. Disciplined. Alive. Fifth kill at 8:03. A Nakajima Key, 43 Oscar this time. The aircraft disintegrated under his guns. McCampbell barely noticed the passage of time. Dive. Fire. Climb. Sixth kill. Seventh kill. The Japanese formation collapsed entirely. Aircraft scattered west toward Luzon. He checked his ammunition. Less than 400 rounds remaining. He had fired 2,000 rounds in 30 minutes. Rushing pulled alongside and made hand signals. Tapped his guns. Then drew a finger across his throat. Empty. Completely out of ammunition. Defenseless. The correct decision was obvious. Escort his wingman home. But Japanese fighters still filled the sky. Still threatened the fleet. And McCampbell still had ammunition. He pointed downward toward another enemy aircraft. Rushing nodded. Followed. Even unarmed, his presence forced the enemy to divide their attention. A Hellcat without ammunition looked exactly like one ready to fire. The Japanese pilots could not know the difference. Until it was too late. McCampbell selected his 8th target. A climbing Zero. This pilot was better. Faster. More cautious. But not cautious enough. The Japanese pilot saw them coming. Instead of fleeing, he turned toward them. Head on. It was a classic Zero tactic. Forced the heavier American fighter into a turning fight, where the lighter, more maneuverable Japanese aircraft held the advantage. McCampbell had seen it before. Coral Sea. Midway. The Marianas. Japanese pilots trusted maneuverability the way American pilots trusted firepower. They believed turning skill could defeat anything. McCampbell did not accept the invitation. Instead, he rolled inverted and pulled down through the merge. Negative G-forces slammed him against his harness. Blood rushed toward his head. His vision narrowed, darkening at the edges. For a moment, the world became nothing but tunnel and target. He completed the maneuver and emerged behind the Zero. Perfect position. Perfect geometry. 300 yards. He squeezed the trigger. This time, he fired only a short burst. Conserving ammunition. 50 rounds. Maybe less. The effect was immediate. The Zero's canopy exploded outward in fragments of aluminum and shattered plexiglass. The aircraft rolled violently and fell away, gravity taking control where life had ended. No fire. No explosion. Just silence and descent. 8th kill. One more. One more would break the American Navy's single mission record. One more would make history. McCampbell pulled the Hellcat upward again, but something felt wrong. The aircraft responded sluggishly. The engine was no longer smooth. He glanced down. Cylinder head temperature was deep in the red. He had been running full combat power for over 40 minutes. Even the Pratt & Whitney R-2800, the toughest engine in naval aviation, had limits. Tropical heat. Full throttle. High altitude. The machine was dying. At 8:40, He saw his final opportunity. A lone Zero, fleeing west toward Luzon. Running for home. The pilot had seen enough. McCampbell rolled into his last dive. The Zero pilot spotted him and dove as well. It was a fatal mistake. The Hellcat was heavier, faster in descent, built to dominate vertical combat. McCampbell closed rapidly. 200 yards. He placed the gun sight directly on the enemy's engine cowling. He fired. His final extended burst. Tracers walked up the fuselage. The Zero's engine seized instantly. Black smoke poured outward. The aircraft tipped forward and plunged into the cloud layer below. 9th kill. 9 aircraft destroyed in 90 minutes. A record. No other Navy pilot would equal it. McCampbell keyed his radio for the first time since takeoff. His voice was calm, measured. He reported 9 confirmed kills. The radio operator asked him to repeat. He repeated it. 9 confirmed. Then he looked down at his fuel gauge and felt cold. The main tank was empty. The auxiliary tank showed barely 1/8 remaining. 20 gallons. Maybe 30 minutes of flight time, if he throttled back to minimum power. He looked toward the horizon. The Philippine coastline lay behind him. He had chased the enemy nearly 100 miles from the fleet. 100 miles back. 30 minutes of fuel. The math did not work. He reduced power immediately. 1,800 revolutions per minute. Bare minimum. The Hellcat shuddered in protest. But it stayed airborne. Rushing pulled alongside. His wingman shook his head. Out of fuel too. Both aircraft were running on fumes. McCampbell turned east. Toward the fleet. Toward survival. Altitude became everything. Altitude was distance. Energy stored in gravity. At 18,000 feet, he had perhaps 36 miles of glide. The Philippine coast disappeared behind them. Ahead was only open ocean. Dark. Cold. Merciless. The water below would kill a man in less than 30 minutes. McCampbell had no intention of touching it. He leaned the mixture fully lean. Watched the fuel gauge fall. The needle touched empty. The engine coughed. Recovered. Then coughed again. Running on vapor. He spotted the fleet ahead. Tiny shapes on the horizon. 60 miles away. Impossible distance. The engine sputtered again at 50 miles. He switched tanks. Nothing. Both gauges read empty. The engine continued only on residual fuel trapped in lines and pumps. Hope and mechanics. Nothing more. The sound changed. Rough. Uneven. The Hellcat was dying. Rushing's aircraft was worse. White vapor streamed behind him. Oil temperature rising. Engines built for combat were never meant for 90 minutes of continuous maximum stress. 10,000 feet. 40 miles remaining. He could see the fleet clearly now. Carriers surrounded by cruisers and destroyers. Steel moving across endless water. 8,000 feet. 7,000. Then, a black explosion appeared ahead. A 5-inch anti-aircraft shell burst in his path. Another. Closer. The destroyers were firing. They saw 2 aircraft approaching from enemy territory. From the direction of Luzon. The IFF transponder should have identified him. But electronics failed. Radar operators made mistakes. Another shell exploded nearby. The fleet was trying to kill him. McCampbell shoved the nose downward, diving toward the surface. Rushing followed. The anti-aircraft fire ceased. But worse was coming. Combat Air Patrol. 4 Hellcats appeared. American fighters. Closing fast. They had been ordered to intercept unidentified aircraft. McCampbell could see their gun ports. Their weapons. Their intent. He could not change radio frequency. Could not risk releasing the controls. He broke left violently. 4G forces crushed him. His engine nearly quit. The American fighters followed. They were forcing him toward the water. Standard intercept procedure. Rushing was facing the same fate. 8 friendly aircraft attempting to shoot them down. 3 miles from safety. His engine was dying. 400 yards behind him. Then suddenly, the lead American fighter broke off. No gunfire. No shots fired. Recognition. Someone had realized the truth. The others followed. The threat vanished. His engine quit completely 2 miles from USS Essex. Total silence. The propeller windmilled uselessly. He was gliding now. Airspeed, 120 knots. Altitude, 1,000 feet. He would not reach Essex. He saw another carrier. USS Langley. Smaller. Closer. Flight deck clear. He turned toward it. One chance. Deadstick landing. No power. No second attempt. Langley steamed directly into the wind. He dropped the landing gear. It locked with a heavy mechanical thump. He reached for flaps. Stopped. Flaps meant drag. Drag meant death. Gear down. Flaps up. Committed. Langley filled his vision. He could see the landing signal officer waving desperately, giving the cut signal. Abort. Too high. Too fast. Wrong angle. McCampbell ignored it. He had no engine. No throttle. No correction. Only gravity and momentum. 500 feet. Half a mile. 400 feet. 300. The Hellcat crossed the stern at 50 feet. The landing signal officer dove for cover. McCampbell's landing gear cleared the deck edge by inches, and physics decided the rest. The Hellcat struck the deck with brutal force. The impact slammed upward through the airframe as the landing gear compressed to their mechanical limits. For a fraction of a second, everything depended on steel, cable, and timing. Then, the tail hook caught the third arresting wire. Perfect engagement. The steel cable snapped taut, stretching under enormous load. The Hellcat decelerated from 90 knots to 0 in barely 3 seconds. 8 G-forces slammed forward. McCampbell's head snapped violently against the headrest. His vision blurred. At that exact moment, the engine died. Completely. The propeller stopped turning. Fuel starvation. Total. The aircraft had consumed everything. Deck crew sprinted toward the fighter immediately. Standard procedure demanded speed. Clear the landing area. Prepare for the next aircraft. But when they attempted to release the tail hook, nothing happened. No hydraulic pressure. The engine-driven pump was dead. The system was lifeless. For sailors grabbed the mechanism manually. They pulled, lifted, forced it free by hand. McCampbell remained seated in the cockpit, staring at the fuel gauge. The needle rested below empty. Absolute zero. 30 seconds later, Rushing's Hellcat slammed onto the deck behind him. His aircraft caught the second wire. His engine died during rollout. 2 Hellcats. 2 dead engines. 2 pilots alive. Both aircraft battered by combat and pushed beyond their limits. The deck crew shoved the fighters forward into the parking area. Inspection began instantly. McCampbell climbed out of the cockpit. His legs nearly collapsed beneath him. 90 minutes of uninterrupted combat. High G-forces. Adrenaline withdrawal. His body struggled to return to normal. A deck officer approached, clipboard in hand. Post-flight debriefing began immediately. McCampbell reported calmly. 9 confirmed kills. 1 probable. Multiple attack runs. Ammunition expended. Fuel exhausted. The officer wrote every word. Then waited. An ordnance chief climbed onto the Hellcat. He opened the ammunition bays one by one. Port side. Starboard side. He counted carefully. He climbed down slowly. Spoke quietly. 2 rounds remaining. 2. Out of 2,400 rounds loaded that morning, McCampbell had fired 2,398 rounds. 99.9% of his ammunition. The chief had never seen anything like it. Not in 3 years of carrier warfare. Fuel crews examined the tanks next. They opened the caps. Inserted calibrated measuring sticks. Main tank, empty. Auxiliary tank, empty. Reserve tank, empty. The engine had run on vapor alone during the final minutes of flight. Residual fumes. Nothing more. 10 more minutes of flight, and he would have died in the ocean. If he had tried to reach USS Essex, he would have fallen short by less than a mile. The deck officer stared at him. 9 kills. 2 rounds remaining. 0 fuel. Forced landing on a different carrier. Nearly shot down by his own fleet on return. The officer had seen hundreds of combat recoveries. This one was different. McCampbell asked the question that mattered most. The 5 pilots he had sent after the bombers. Had they survived? The officer checked the status board. All 5 had returned safely. 2 confirmed kills. 3 probables. No American aircraft lost. The Japanese strike had failed. Not a single bomb reached the carriers. Task Group 38. 3 remained intact. McCampbell walked toward the carrier island and looked east. USS Essex lay 4 miles away. Flight operations continued without pause. Hellcats launched into the sky. War did not stop for individual victories. October 24, 1944 was only the beginning. The largest naval battle in history was unfolding across hundreds of miles of ocean. Japanese naval forces were advancing from multiple directions. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, aircraft, everything Japan had left. This was Operation Shogo, Victory Operation. Their final attempt to stop the American invasion. A medical corpsman approached McCampbell. Routine examination. pulse, blood pressure, oxygen exposure, hypoxia symptoms. Everything normal, except his hands. They were shaking, adrenaline leaving his system, his body returning from the edge of death. A message arrived from USS Essex. Return immediately. Debriefing required. A destroyer would transfer him. McCampbell looked at Rushing. His wingman sat exhausted atop his aircraft's wing. 6 kills. 15 enemy aircraft destroyed between them. More than most squadrons achieved in weeks. Rushing would receive the Navy Cross, second highest decoration for valor. They had done their job. McCampbell descended into the ship. A whaleboat waited below. The sea was rough. 3-foot swells slammed against the hull. The transfer required precise timing. He climbed the rope ladder onto Essex's deck. An officer waited. No ceremony. No congratulations. Only urgency. He was needed immediately. Inside the intelligence center, the war unfolded across maps and markers. Japanese fleet movements. American carrier positions. Battleships. Task forces. The battleship Musashi had been hit repeatedly. Torpedoes. Bombs. Yet still afloat. Still advancing. Still dangerous. McCampbell studied the situation silently. The battle was far from over. Another strike would launch soon. He would lead it. His Hellcat remained behind on USS Langley, destroyed by exhaustion. A replacement aircraft was already being prepared. He had 90 minutes. 90 minutes to recover. 90 minutes before returning to combat. In the ready room, his pilots waited. 23 men. Some exhausted. Some preparing to fly again. They looked at him differently now. They had heard. 9 kills. 1 mission. Record. But McCampbell understood something they all knew. Records did not win wars. Survival did. And the battle was still raging. What McCampbell earned that day went beyond admiration. It became legend. For 7 relentless months, since April 1944, he had flown from the deck of USS Essex as Task Force 58 carved its way across the Pacific. The Marshall Islands. Truk. Saipan. Guam. Tinian. Peleliu. Formosa. Now the Philippines. More than 20,000 flight hours logged by Air Group 15. 6 months of uninterrupted combat. The numbers told their own story. 315 enemy aircraft destroyed in the air. 348 more annihilated on the ground. No other American air group in the Pacific had inflicted that level of destruction. McCampbell himself had entered that morning with 25 confirmed victories. His previous greatest day had come months earlier, on June 19, 1944, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. The day American pilots would later call the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. 400 Japanese aircraft had launched against the American fleet in one desperate wave. McCampbell shot down 5 Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bombers in his first sortie. 2 more Zeros fell during his second. 7 kills in one day. Ace in a day. He had been the only American pilot to achieve it twice. Now, on October 24, 1944, he had surpassed even himself. 9 kills in 90 minutes. No Navy pilot would ever equal it. Not during the war. Not ever. Lieutenant Cecil Harris would come closest, destroying 7 aircraft in a single mission over Formosa. But 9 remained untouched. A ceiling no one else would reach. Because what McCampbell achieved required perfection. Perfect altitude. Perfect timing. Perfect discipline. Perfect restraint with ammunition. Perfect management of fuel. And perfect survival in a sky filled with death. At 1,300 hours, the intelligence officer began the next briefing. The war had not paused to honor records. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force was still advancing through the Sibuyan Sea. His flagship, the heavy cruiser Atago, had already been sunk that morning by the submarine USS Darter. Kurita had transferred his command to the battleship Yamato, the largest battleship ever built. 72,000 tons of armored steel. 9 18-inch guns capable of firing shells weighing over 3,000 pounds across 26 miles. One hit could erase a destroyer from existence. Essex would launch another strike at 1,400 hours. 36 aircraft. 12 Hellcat fighters. 12 Helldiver dive bombers. 12 Avenger torpedo planes. McCampbell would lead the fighters. Their mission was simple in theory. Suppress anti-aircraft fire while the bombers attacked Musashi and Yamato. In practice, it meant flying directly into the most concentrated defensive firepower ever assembled at sea. More than 150 anti-aircraft guns per battleship. The sky itself would become shrapnel. At 13:55, McCampbell climbed into a replacement Hellcat, aircraft number 47. Not his usual machine, but identical in every critical way. Same Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engine. Same 6.50 caliber machine guns. Same deadly precision. The deck surged with motion around him. Armorers loaded bombs beneath Helldivers. Torpedoes hung beneath Avengers. Deck crews guided aircraft forward in choreographed urgency. He pushed the throttle forward. The Hellcat surged down the deck and lifted into the afternoon sky. 36 aircraft formed behind him. They turned west, toward the Sibuyan Sea, toward Musashi, toward one of the most heavily defended warships ever constructed. The attack unfolded in fire and steel. McCampbell dove low, strafing destroyers escorting the battleship. His machine guns raked across gun positions, forcing crews to abandon their weapons. Above him, Helldivers plunged from altitude, releasing bombs. Avengers skimmed the waves, dropping torpedoes at point-blank range. Hit after hit. Explosion after explosion. The great battleship began to die. By evening, Musashi had absorbed 19 torpedo strikes and 17 bomb hits. At 19:30 hours, she rolled over and sank beneath the sea. Over 2,300 crewmen went down with her. The largest warship ever destroyed by aircraft. McCampbell landed safely aboard Essex at 1,700 hours. The battle continued for 3 more days. When it finally ended on October 27th, the Imperial Japanese Navy had ceased to exist as a meaningful fighting force. 4 aircraft carriers lost. 3 battleships sunk. 10 cruisers destroyed. 11 destroyers gone. 26 warships totaling more than 300,000 tons. It was the end of Japan's naval dominance, and McCampbell had stood at the center of it. He flew his final combat mission on November 14, 1944. When Air Group 15 returned to the United States, his final record stood unmatched. 212 combat missions, 34 aerial victories, 21 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground. He was the United States Navy's top fighter ace. The ace of aces. In January 1945, President Franklin Roosevelt personally presented him with the Medal of Honor. The citation spoke simply. He had faced overwhelming enemy air power. He had destroyed 9 aircraft in a single mission. He had saved the fleet. McCampbell remained in the Navy after the war. He retired in 1964 after 31 years of service. He lived quietly, never boasting, never claiming heroism, only saying he had done his duty. He died on June 30, 1996, at age 86. He rests now at Arlington National Cemetery. His Hellcat still exists. Bureau number 70143. Preserved at the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida. Dark blue paint. White stars. 34 Japanese flags beneath the cockpit. Each one representing an aircraft destroyed. Each one a moment where skill met survival. Each one a reminder of what happened on October 24, 1944. 2 fighters. 60 enemies. 9 kills. 2 rounds remaining. 0 fuel. Engine dead at touchdown. A record that still stands. 80 years later.